the other guy had been there quite a couple of years and left. And that meant that new producer wants to put his stamp on everything from their side. He wants to just give it a little extra oomph, so we do a little redesigning literally 3 weeks before we go out with this game, which wasn't too bad, luckily. But sticking a story into a game that's obviously conforming to a 64K build deliverable at the end of the day. There's the highest end was, I think, 260 kilobytes, so there's some room to move. But when you put a story in, story means full screen headshots for Pixar with some minor lips and maybe in a text block. That is a lot to cater for. So enter into negotiations again, and what we basically did is we put it in the high end, but you're never going to see that kind of stuff in a 64K build. We have to reduce the texture so much that you literally have 4 colors to work with. So interesting little thing right at the end, but relatively also worked out to be a pretty good success rate in our eyes. It's a very playable game. I walk around with it on my phone to this day. My wife didn't actually enjoy playing it. And we got a decent rating out of that. A lot of mileage with Ratatouille. We released on time with the movie. Part of the reason we had such a long development time is because we didn't have to release any earlier than what the movie was coming out. And if memory serves me, I think Pixar also delayed it by another 2 months because they did some character changes, which was, at least from a 2D Pixar point of view, not that big a deal to us, because if you suddenly raise Remy's eyebrow for the movie, it doesn't come across that well on the 2D art anyway, so an eyebrow is not a big deal. We don't go back and reinvent Remy as an art sprite. So that was a really, really good project to work with. Again, just to draw some comparisons, you compare this to Madden with the kind of team size, the timeline that's running there, you compare it even to the previous Tinkerbell. These are very different projects. I mean, vastly different compared to it. I worked prior in PC and console, and there's kind of like a formula, and you end up working about the same amount of time on every project. You don't get a lot of break in between this kind of thing. You don't always get to try anything new. On mobile production, that's exactly what it gives me. This is why I choose mobile production over anything else from my end. If we can move on to the final case study. Good for time. This is actually the one that inspired my title to begin with. We had, as we go through the brief, I'll explain it to you. The Fast and the Furious is a pretty big franchise globally, not just in the US but also Europe. Our clients in this case were actually some Scottish publishers by the name of iPlay. And they wanted to bring the next installment of Fugitive full onto 3D phones, mass market, get as much content and stuff that we possibly can fit into a 2.5 meg deliverable, which is pretty big for mobile phones. You don't get any of you ever downloaded a game across mobile. I'd be surprised if you did anything bigger than 300, at least from Tantalus side. If you go over to Europe and so on, they tend to average 1.5 meg for a game size. So to get 2.5 meg on a game is literally being told you have no limits almost. We can just shove so much in there. So the general premise of the Fast and the Furious franchise was you've got to support 4 cities, LA, Miami, Baton Rouge and Santa Fe, if I remember. It had a big story mode, it had customization, street races, evasion modes, we had cop chases, we had a whole bunch of things in this that just made it such a full content-rich game. The team that I got was 7 individuals, 3 engineers, 3 artists, and the 1 guy for the QA, which is, from team size point of view, it's a decent sized team, but given the kind of content we had on this particular project, it was still a bit of a challenge, especially when you tie it into a timeline of 7 months. So this is where the 7 people, 7 months, the 7 million is actually the Too Fast, Too Furious franchise had already downloads in excess of 7 million for the franchise, not any one particular title, but for the franchise, before they brought it to Fireman's doorstep. That's a lot of way to enter any kind of new project with knowing it's just like entering the Maddens. All these big franchises tend to already have a certain amount of pressure put upon them. So it tends to translate over to the team and they know what they're up against. Sorry. Alright. Publisher, like I said, Scottish iPlay. And then the challenge on this was, it was a 3D only game for us. Brew and Java high-end. There was massive content, and even halfway through this, the publisher decided that it would actually be a very good idea if we could just quickly also do a Macron and Symbian version. We had to negotiate, so if I'm dead honest with you, that 7 months became about 9.5 after they added on those extra 2 SKUs. But generally, for what we originally entered into as the agreement side of it, we upheld really, really well, and still have iPlay as a publisher coming back to us, just like we do with Madden. So, right, let's get into the reality of this one. The design was actually run out of Scotland. That's great, especially when they're doing the 2D game, and a lot of their designs don't always translate well into 3D. Unfortunately, we missed a guy who would have been up here earlier this morning from Fireman who would have actually discussed from a game design point of view, and I believe he was going to tap into some of that. It's not always the best idea to be driving 3D from a 2D design. Car models. One of the interesting bits of feedback we got was actually that we'd done so well with our car models, we actually had to taper them back because, as it turns out, iPlay didn't have the license to use the actual cars from the movies, only the characters and the name and the songs and so forth, but they didn't have the cars. Interesting bit of feedback. The city detail in this game we had to push to new levels on a mobile phone. We actually had, if you can think on it, a mobile phone version of a GTA type game, the Grand Theft Auto, in a big open world, multiple routes you can drive through, this kind of thing. It's not just a tunnel racer, you don't just have one track, this kind of thing. You had to drive in 4 open cities. That's quite a feat to pull off on any mobile phone. We did on this. And then we showed the publisher our early prototypes, and they were so impressed with our first efforts that they decided, well, maybe they're setting the sights too low for us. So what happened there is you tend to get additional features added on because they thought we could cope because we looked so really good right from the prototype version already. That's what I learned. You should probably hold something back from prototype just so that you don't get that kind of deal. Turns out the publisher had also never done Symbian before, asking me and my team to please produce for them a Symbian build about 2/3 of the way through our production line. This just meant that this was our first Symbian build too. It just meant that we had to drive it from our side with nothing more than a bit of tech savvy, not having used Symbian phones before, this kind of thing. That's your Nokia high-end A95s, if anyone's running around with them and that kind of stuff. They got some decent capabilities, but when most of your experience is on a multi-platform system like NDN that caters for JSR, Mascot, and Brew, you don't have a lot of experience walking into a Symbian environment, and it just meant, like I said, we had to negotiate that extra time at the end and just say, if you're going to throw 2 extra SKUs on top of me, you're going to have to cut me some slack. The result was actually probably hands down our greatest claim to success yet from our end. 7 people and essentially 7 months for the Brew and JSR is quite a feat when you look at the amount of content that we put in here. We won a lot of rave reviews and a couple of awards and commendations and things like that. And I think to this stage, a lot of people still draw to Furious as a benchmark for a lot of the mobile 3D games, which Fireman very much enjoys and try our heads to. So thanks so much. It was a great team that worked on that. But this is again the other side of the scope again is you could still have very high profile titles in mobile production, or I could have more mediocre like the Tinkerbells, or somewhere in between, which is kind of like the Ratatouilles from a franchise/license point perspective. But at the same time, I'm working with multiple projects that run anywhere from 3 to 10. I mean, one now that will probably run us 12 months. These are the kind of options that mobile production affords me that I feel prior I never had. And one of the chief reasons why I moved over into Fireman control the mobile production team. So generally, that's the sum conclusion of my presentation. And what it comes down to is to just sum it up again. Is like I said, the reason I chose mobile is for no other reason than it affords me options and possibilities that I feel I do not have working outside on something that might run a 4-year cycle, for instance. It's great for a creative environment, it's great for keeping you on your toes. Multiple projects need multiple unique little challenges and, hey, multitasking at the same time. Thank you so much for listening to me. If that was a little bit interesting.